I'm over here.
Good. I hope so.
It's the season that takes.
That old guy is.
Yeah, we're a little. Good to go? Yeah, I think we're ready to get started again. And again, for those on the line, sorry we're a few minutes technical difficulty, but we're all together now. And I think Cedric, this was our chance to have a date discussion plan. So I'll turn things over to you. Again, for those on the line, technical difficulty. Not gonna work well.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say a couple of things. Where we are with the strategic plan. And the first thing I would tell you is I got a lot of high praise and compliments for a lot of hard work that's been done by a lot of people to meet this timeline of getting a draft in front of the board by the September board. I think as I came in, there was a lot of discussion about what the time frame that it typically takes to develop a strategic plan for an institution or a college. And we were able to shorten it just by kind of some sheer force of will, holding some folks accountable, but also having a real talented group of folks that organize this thing, and the process by which we used to come up with the draft that's sitting. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we went into this and what the strategic plan is intended to convey, not only to you all as board members, but to the larger VMI family in terms of the direction of the institute here for the next 10 years. And it still points us towards our bicentennial, but our thinking was that we would develop a strategic plan that kind of shapes the near, mid, and far-term continuum going out to about 10 years, and then allow us to assess, recock, adjust, and then see what would be necessary for the next document. But as it's written right now, the strategic plan that we come up with really covers about the next 10 years of the life of the institute. Put that. Okay. And so this is intended to be a decision brief. Now, I fully understand and acknowledge that any recommendation that I put forward will go through the normal board process where at the appointed time, I shouldn't expect at the end of this brief that a decision. It'll obviously occur with some discussion, conversation by the board members, and that somewhere here over the next day or two, there'll be, based on that discussion, the appropriateness of whether vision is prepared and ready to go for the strategic plan to move forward in terms of the final document that will occur. But this briefing is intended to hit the highlights of kind of the process that we worked, the input that was received and how it was shaped, and talk about kind of the vision of the Institute, the reinforcement of our mission, the vision, a summary of the values and how we see them so that we have a consistent set of values across the board that describe what the Institute is, what the Institute should be about in the future. And then kind of getting into what those 5 major strategic initiatives are and touching upon kind of some of the objectives associated with them. And then kind of maybe a very, very brief discussion about what the road ahead ought to be for the work that's been done thus far. So just the first chart is intended to just kind of show an overview. Bouncing around them.
All right.
All right. So the first is, again, first was the purpose and what we had to undertake in terms of the strategic plan. We recognize that Vision 2039 was developed somewhere around in 2003, 2004 timeframe. It had served the Institute well for the past 17, 18 years. You look at the amount of investment in the physical plant and the facilities and the post itself, and you can see that a lot of return on investment came about through a lot of investment that took place, both in terms of facilities, infrastructure, but also, moreover, you see that some of the offerings in our academic program were beefed up as a result of Vision 2039 with the advent of the Sept leadership and ethics, a review of the academic program under which we now operate, and so on and so forth. And so I believe that it positioned us very well at this particular point in time to begin to think about what it is that's important for the Institute to do and to be over the next 10 years, point towards bicentennial. And so there are some things certainly that are contained within the strategic plan that point to some bold initiatives. But there's also some things that are really rooted in the fundamentals of the Institute, how we're going to continue to reinforce those, and how there's no plan to deviate from the fundamental about the Institute. The last time I briefed the Board of Visitors back in the April-May timeframe, I talked about how we are the Virginia Military Institute, right? And so by virtue of who we are a public college in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we serve the needs of Virginians as well as people across the nation who want to get undergraduate education presently in a college of higher education in the Commonwealth. And we also are a military college, one of 6 senior military colleges, but one with a very, very unique culture and environment where we don't have any competitors. Probably have one that comes close. We don't have competitors, in my view, in the type of academic offering that we provide here, that is not only things that occur in the classroom, but things that occur in our barracks in terms of cadet life, and things that occur across the full span of the, when it comes to that unique military environment. And then we are an institute. So again, we don't call ourselves a university, we call ourselves an institute for that very reason. The fact that our cadets, our students, they learn in many different environments. They learn leadership, which is one of the most important facets of what is taught here. They learn the importance and how experience here is rooted in the honor through our honor code and through the character building that we talk about so that our young men and women grow and develop. And when they are finished here, they're fully prepared to go out into the workforce and lead as people of character who have high integrity, who are ethically and morally on the right path, and are and can be contributors to the nation and to the state. And so as we began the work on the strategic plan, these were some of the things that we were focused on. We wanted to focus our efforts on setting up the institute for both the near term and the long term. We wanted to make sure that the plan was manageable in terms of the scope of the ideas that are being talked about with respect to our strategic plan. And we wanted something that would allow the full VMI family to become unified, engaged, and enthused about the next 10 to 20 years of the Institute's life. The guiding tenets are talked about here, and I think they're very, very simple and direct, but I think they're very, very important for us to understand, right? We want to be a first choice destination for talented cadets, faculty, and staff. We want people to want to come to VMI because they understand the value proposition of what you get out of a VMI education. We have the data that shows the return on investment to the Institute. We have the data that shows what we typically rank as an institute of higher education, all those things. And all those things are very important in allowing us to continue to be a first choice destination for folks who want to be here. The leadership and education model that we have, we want to expand the visibility of it so that it is appreciated and modeled after by other colleges of higher education in their own way. But we certainly want that to be something that people say, hey, look, there's Virginia Military Institute. Let's go and see why their students and their alumni are so successful. And what is it about their model that we can look at and perhaps adopt just by the knowledge of what VMI produces. And then to develop and graduate honorable and young men who have courage to serve. I think as we speak about it, as we've thought about it, we talk more about this idea of service compared to the previous strategy. And that idea of service doesn't diminish the value of military service and where we are, which is we're a top 5 missioning producing source across all services, 5%. The previous strategy talked about getting up to about 70% in terms of commissioning as a goal. It wasn't a stated requirement. Oh, and certainly I think if we talk about service, there are many other opportunities that the education and training here make a VMI graduate well suited to do, whether it's to be a career diplomat in State Department, whether it's to be an employee, one of the federal agencies, one of the 3-letter agencies, intel agencies is a great offering. To be someone that is a professional in the capacity of a first responder. All of these things are great opportunities that demonstrate service by people above and beyond what we talk about in the military. Certainly don't have the numbers, but we know that across the board, there's a heavy turnover of young men and women who go to serve initially, and at some point in their career, whether it's a family situation, whether it's a stronger desire to go and pursue something else, they will turn over in their desire to remain in military service or other types of services. So we believe that the foundation of what's going on in the Institute is designed and intentionally designed to develop young men and women who can serve in not only a military capacity, but serve with the same elements of character, self-development, high integrity, high moral and ethical decision-making that is well suited not only in the military, but also in public life, in the private sector, on and on. Next. I'm sorry, go back one. And so that led us to the development of those 5 strategic initiatives that I'll talk about later. Go ahead. And so this is kind of the timeline of how we matured this effort to develop the strategic plan. It goes back and talks about the engagement that took place upon my arrival with many across the board in the Institute family, principally focused on the listening sessions that I had and conducted with members of the Corps cadets, staff and faculty, and in some instances, alumni, about the climate, the culture, where certain areas are within the Institute that we could do better. A lot of that ended up in the One Corps, One VMI. And if you've never read that, I'd ask you to go back and read that. Because I think that those 5 outcomes that are defined in One Corps, One VMI signal kind of the enduring things about the Institute that we all ought to remain focused on. And so on one of the earlier pages of the document, it talks about those 5 outcomes and how even these initiatives, as we achieve them, they will reinforce that VMI is a college that produces young men and women who help demonstrate those 5 outcomes as a part of our strategic direction. We enlisted the help of PMG Consulting. We formed steering groups, and then we conducted a focus group or a set of surveys that went out. And I think those focus groups, which were led by the senior execs and key leaders and the whole of the Institute participate, told us a lot about the direction that the Institute ought to be thinking about going. And so what it led us to do during the offsite was to have a conversation and discuss about the mission, the vision, and the values, which typically a strategic plan makes sure that the ideas that they're going to begin to promote are rooted in the mission and the consistency of the mission, the vision, and values of the Institute. So we looked at the mission, we revalidated the mission, which is not uncommon, that the mission as it was written is sound and it ought to remain sound. There certainly were some words that we debated about, but at the end of the day, we believe that the mission of the Institute, as it's written, is very much in keeping with the direction that the Institute ought to be focused going out for the next 10 to 20 years. And the vision and values the same. We revalidated the vision. When it came to the values of the Institute, that I'll talk about a little bit later, it was really about an understanding of getting a consistent set of values that we think typically defines VMI and a VMI cadet and a VMI graduate. Meaning that we had, in various different writings, we had a different set of values, a few words at a time, throughout other writings that were not consistent. So we're trying to reestablish consistency in the values that define a VMI cadet and a VMI graduate. Next. Phase 2 was, again, as I talked about, the retreat. And then we had a first draft that went out that was largely produced by the PMG group, where they synthesized a lot of the points that were discussed during the offsite into a document that was very, very broad. It had 6 initiatives that were kind of the initial proposal. And then through some work that was largely confined to the Institute senior executive leaders, we began to shape more of a conversation and discussion and settle on what those initiatives might be and kind of the construct of developing a set of initiatives, and then some key goals, finding some, or vice versa, some key goals and some objectives that would begin to shape what this document finally ended up being. And then we continued to move and iterate the document over a number of turns. And I enlisted the help of some senior mentors and leaders both in the Institute and outside of the Institute, give me their thoughts and feedback about the draft strategy as it became more and more mature. And those included both Mr. Watch and John Adams, who were part of the committee and the work that was being done. And we came up with a final draft, and that's the draft that you see before you today for your approval. Next. And so these are the mission and vision and values. So again, no change to the mission. We still want to produce audible, educated young men and women prepared for very work life, civil life, imbued with a love of learning, confident in the functions and attitudes of leadership, with a high sense of public service, advocates of the free democracy, American democracy, free enterprise. And then the vision as well. I think it was an alteration, although we didn't change. Citizen leaders has always been correct, or was it citizens? So was it okay? Well, that
Vision 2039.
okay. So citizen leaders, I think, is probably the one subtlety that was adjusted in the vision in terms of what we define as the vision. And then the values, again, we believe that the values of the Institute ought to first and foremost be built on honor and then excellence in what you do, whether it's academic setting or military setting or athletic or competitive setting. Our cadets ought to be steeped in a degree of self-discipline, and that's a learning process over the time of their cadetship. And that as they depart from here, have a sense of grit and determination and courage. The first two not being values, but certainly courage being one of the values that we believe important. And then a sense of esprit de corps and having a common bond among themselves as brother Pats, as members of a particular class, as members of the Corps of Cadets. And then steeped in a sense of selfless service and the ability to be resilient in everything that they do. Yeah. So these are the 5 strategic initiatives that we came up with. Certainly between preparing exceptional leaders and enhancing our academic excellence, those are certainly first and foremost 2 very important areas that we believe are central to the direction that we want to go in terms of the goals and objectives for the institute. And then the others just are intended to make sure that we capture the other areas where emphasis will be placed on how we produce graduates of this institute. So the first is enhance academic excellence. And again, we talk about a goal of a premier leadership development program, one that's premier in the nation, that develops a core of young men and women who are mentally tough, academically astute, physically fit.
Sir, I think the initiative should be Premier Exceptional Leaders for this particular slide. It's just the title at the top is enhanced.
Prepare exceptional leaders.
Yeah, the
Okay.
titles.
Okay, we got them backwards. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Everything else is correct.
All right. Yeah. Okay, so it's prepare exceptional leaders. No, go back. The title is wrong, but the goals and objectives are correct for prepare exceptional leaders. So we're talking about a model of training that is very, very familiar to each and every one of us. The emphasis or the differences on professionalizing the model. I talked about during the last session that probably if you go back to every superintendent going all the way back to General Shell, if you pull some of the documents that are in the historical readings, you will read where many leaders, whether it was the superintendent himself or whether it was a commandant or somebody, has always talked about professionalizing the activities of the RAT line and some of the shortcomings of the RAT line and the VMI experience as the years went by and as the demographics and the dynamics changed among the Corps of Cadets. And so it probably is not a surprise to anyone that as I came in, that is what I was talking about to the commandant and to the members of the Corps. And a lot of times it just comes simply from the experience that you have. My experience having been out in the military for 35 years and then in the corporate sector for about a short period, just under a year. You want young people to graduate from here with a set of good habits, good traits. We talk about these values. We want them to graduate here and go out with those. We don't want them to have to retrain themselves or learn a set of good habits, having learned bad habits in anything that they're doing. So the aim to professional, keep it rigorous, keep it tough, keep it focused on those values is very, very and so we're talking about things in this area that deal with enhancing our model of training. It talks about some of the specific objectives, making sure that those challenges are physically and mentally challenging, and preparing our cadets for service upon graduation, whether that's military service, federal service, or going into the public-private sector and or pursuing advanced degrees beyond undergraduate degrees. And then one bold initiative, I would say, is to look at the idea of a graduate level school program for the Institute that would be intended to be built around the idea of leadership. I recognize that there has been work done in the past to assess the utility of it. But I think that for a number of reasons. Number one, I often get asked about it. And number two, if you think about this whole idea and one of our main goals, which is to try to figure out ways to curb the cost, the rising cost of education, this might be one way. I've talked about a number of times in the last 2 years when the colleges in and around the Commonwealth made decisions about whether or not they were going to increase tuition for in-state and out-of-state students. A lot of times they had multiple levers that they could pull. They could decide on whether or not they were going to raise in-state tuition or in-state or out-of-state tuition undergraduate students. They could hold that flat, but they could raise in-state or out-of-state tuition for their graduate program. Okay, we don't have those levers. And so when we start talking about year-over-year costs and how we can come to grips with how you manage that, some of these ideas are intended to create additional levers for the school from that perspective, but also to do what we do very well, which is provide an academic program and an academic offering, perhaps at a graduate school level, that would be focused and centered on some type of leadership aspect of what we do. Okay, this is enhanced academic excellence, right?
Sure, that is
Okay,
correct.
all right, so you see the goal. The goal is correct, right, for enhanced academic excellence?
For everything else.
All right, and then you see 4 main objectives tied to that: enhanced teaching and learning through a revision of the core curriculum. It's been how many years, Bob, since we core curriculum?
Well, excuse me, sir. I mean, it gets reviewed a little bit year to year, but in a deep sense, 17 years was created, a really deep dive.
Okay. So it's probably time. We talked about, Joe talked about earlier today, a number of the prospective students that made decisions to go seek education elsewhere because they could not find or could not pursue the academic major that they desired here at VMI. And so the dynamics of what's necessary out in the workplace and in the workforce based on your educational background are constantly changing. And so it makes sense that but at least make sure that we're looking at our core curriculum and seeing if there are any changes that are necessary in our academic program. Integrating new technology into our classrooms. I think that we certainly see with what was done down Scottship Hall, we had an opportunity that we took advantage of to rebuild a facility and expand on a facility that had more state-of-the-art equipment. Will be undertaking Nichols Engineering Building here in the coming months. And the idea is to make sure we get it right in terms of how we envision and rebuild that facility, that the capabilities within that facility can last us several decades, if not half a century. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at the right type of capability that exists and how we would incorporate that into our classroom environment, into our learning environment to get a better outcome among our students in terms of how to gain their interest, capture their interest, and get them involved in the classroom and the things that they would do. To continue to recruit and retain and promote distinguished faculty, we've got to be able to maintain the improvements, sustain or improve on what we've done with faculty salaries to ensure that they are competitive across the state of Virginia. And right now, I think we're somewhere between 7 and 8 when the goal was set to be a top 5 in terms of our compensation for faculty. And we're moving in the right direction, and we just need to continue to move in that direction with the ways that we've decided to do it. And then certainly to open up our aperture where we create opportunities, for example, like through the P endowment for the possibility of alumni who are competitive to apply for teaching and faculty positions and to win in that competition where they can become members of our faculty. And we want to continue to create that environment and incentivize that. And then strengthen high impact practices through additional things that could potentially create additional revenue streams for the Institute through undergraduate research, create opportunities for our students through internships and faculty opportunities through faculty, whether it's with another college or whether it's with the Department of Defense, where oftentimes there are a lot of resources that go towards colleges and universities that want to take on the added task and the added benefit of doing research, undergraduate research in our case. We're not trying to become an R1 or R2 institution. The dean, he emphasizes all too often the need to ensure that we have a teaching faculty, but there's a lot of opportunities here for research that would be of benefit not only to our students, but to our faculty as well. Next. Okay, foster esprit de corps. Again, you see the 4 objectives, the 4 goals rather, are contained there in terms of an inclusive environment, where the Code of Cadet is central to our cadet focused efforts. Actions guided by mission appropriate, reputable scholars and organizations, where people can come and bring their talents in terms of their expertise in various different fields to the Institute, have presentations and conversations that are built around this idea of how we develop young leaders and allow our student body and our faculty to be more engaged in those efforts. And I think there's an opportunity for us, quite frankly, to do more as we begin to envision what the Center for Leadership and Ethics Phase 2 will look like, where we can provide more offerings of leadership seminars, perhaps not only for our student body, but for a larger community of folks. And so that's what we're talking about there. employee well-being centered around onboarding and mentoring for new faculty, professional development for those same faculty members, and on and on and on. And then you see the other two: deepen our connection with alumni, donors, and parents, and continue to provide experiential learning for our cadets. To alter and to modify the training where it is more focused on research-based and evidentiary-based learning and experiences where we can measure the outcomes of what they're getting by the physical aspects of the school, the mental stressors, the mental challenges that help build resiliency for our students, our cadets, and so on and so forth. Next, recruit top cadets and boost success. So one of the things that we've talked about with respect to enrollment management has been this idea of we've got to be able to be intentional about going out and recruiting the right young man or woman who wants to undertake the challenge of VMI. But not only do we have to recruit them, as we've talked about, we need to be able to make sure that they are fully prepared to take on this very, very unique experience here at Virginia Military Institute. And I've often referred to this as being academically enriched, right? Where there may be shortfalls that they've experienced or not received coming out of high school. How do we make sure that their skills, whether it's math, reading, writing, physical, whatever it is, how do we ensure that those skills are where they need to be so that they can be successful through this journey? What tools do we have to put in place to ensure that that can happen? And then how do we do that in a deliberate way where the ultimate goal for any young woman coming to college is to graduate? And so how do we do that where we can get a better return on graduation success, our 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation through some very, very deliberate efforts so that we achieve certain goals, top 5 in retention and graduation rates, and that we continue to provide quality support service to our cadets. So that point about quality support services clearly is aimed towards some of the very same things that Jim Joustra talked about this morning in terms of some of the main focus areas that the administration has for higher education in the Commonwealth. Next. Develop 21st century infrastructure. Again, with my background, you can't rest. You can't become complacent when it comes to facilities, sustainment of infrastructure, modernizing where appropriate. You can't become complacent because while you can take great credit for the advancements and the investment that has occurred over $500 million over the last 17, 18 years with respect to where our physical plant, what our physical plant looks like here at the Institute. If you rest for a short span of about 10 years, 15 years, then the next thing you'll see other facilities getting to an age where they're outdated in terms of the capability, or you are experiencing very, very high maintenance costs to sustain those facilities. So we've got to have a deliberate plan that recognizes that with the huge investment that's gone into our facilities thus far, we're in very good position, but we've got to begin to think about how we sustain those, certainly those younger facilities that exist, and how we restore those that might have become old and outdated, either in the capabilities or the size space that's in our facilities. And then how do we modernize when appropriate so that when the time comes, we do have a modern Moody Hall that will support the activity larger alumni donor base. Or we do have a Nichols Engineering building that will grow in square footage, but also bring into it modern technology in the lab spaces that we. And so the last one is on enhancing our post-wide safety and security. Another point that was made by Jim Joustra this morning with some of the priorities of administration. It shouldn't be lost on anyone that, probably 8 to 10 years ago, I guess it was, when the incident at Virginia Tech took place. Just last year, there was an incident that took place at VA. And then I think the year before, there was an incident that took place at Bridgewater College. Okay. All of these things are happening at colleges and universities that are kind of within our footprint, if you will, neighboring colleges right up the road, a couple of hours down the road. That certainly, from my perspective, when you do kind of the vulnerability assessment, it is not out of the realm of possibility that something unforeseen could happen here. And so when you do the assessment on where we sit from I'll call it a force protection, but a student protection standpoint, there are some vulnerabilities. And so the funding that we've received from the Commonwealth to do the post-wide safety security, the funding that we've received for the design of cadet barracks safety and security are going to be much needed to make sure that we are at least protected to the degree that we can, so that if something were to happen, we can mitigate it as best we can. So these are the next steps. Certainly we have some work to do in terms of whatever action items come out of this particular meeting and leading us to the approval of the strategic plan. And then we want to set ourselves in a position where we begin to identify what are the key measures and metrics that we need to establish to track ourselves to progress. And so that work is going to have to be done. And then we'll get on the path of tracking that progress, along with having conversations with the alumni agencies, because certainly this plan identifies a number of initiatives, as I said, up front, that are going to require resources. So we're going to begin to have a conversation with the agencies about how we can package this and present it in such a way where people get excited about it, but also they understand that this is kind of the natural course of colleges and institutions if you want to ensure the viability and the survival out into the future. And then we'll report on progress as often, as frequently as established by the battle rhythm of board activity.
Back to metrics, is your sense a fair amount of what we just talked about? You can develop a measurable sort of component, which makes it easier for us as a board, therefore, to keep an eye on progress, or
yes,
maybe a little bit more deeply into the metric side, the dashboard side.
Sure. So as we were thinking about these initiatives and the goals and objectives, I think the team did a whole lot of work to try to begin to, as you identify, particularly the goals and the objectives, particularly the objectives, and then subsequent probably some tasks, to define how measurable are those tasks as it relates to helping meeting that goal or objective. So we've already begun doing some work. Lee and his team have already begun doing some work, come up with a set of metrics associated with those goals and objectives. So as we were developing the strategic plan, that was at the forefront of the team's mind throughout, I'd say.
Not starting from scratch.
We're not, in fact, I got probably at least 5 pages of draft goals and metrics that Lee and his team has worked. And again, this strategy is a high-level document, right? So the idea is that once approved, each exec will sit around the table and we'll identify the parts and pieces that the objectives, that the initiatives that one or more exec is going to take ownership of, the goals and objectives that are contained in them. And that's how we're going to hold ourselves accountable, is by number one, assigning ownership, and then coming to a mutual understanding about how it relates to these actions and these metrics. And then we're going to track ourselves over time to say, what progress are we making in those? We aren't necessarily going to lock ourselves in on everything. There's expected to be, I would expect that there's going to be some degree of fluidity particularly when we talk about the tasks. Okay, but the initiatives are what they are. The goals are what they are. But how we go and arrive at them, the success of them through these various different tasks, there may be a little bit of fluidity.
Comments? Ron, you want to say anything? I think you and I were both part of the journey here. And I remember like the first version, I think you paraphrase it seemed a little bit stale and hate to say it, a little more consult speak as opposed to VMI speak, but anything maybe you want to say about the process?
Yeah, I mean, I just encourage the other board members to tell us what you think and tell us if you've had a chance to absorb it, because I can tell you, Tom and I have been involved in this process a little bit, and it's even for us, I think it's been an iterative process. So like at various times we've kind of poured our heart and soul into it, and then it goes back into the machine, and then it comes back, and and so I encourage my big point on this is, since we've had an opportunity to have some input on it, I just think it's important for all the board members to make sure that you are comfortable, that you're seeing what you want. I can tell you not all of my recommendations were made or kept. Some of them were for sure. But I think we need to make sure people feel comfortable. This is an important document.
Sure is. Yeah.
So.
Okay. Other thoughts, comments, or?
Well, I like it a lot. Yeah. I think it's exceedingly well done. It's very aspirational, which a plan should be. Great vision and high goals to achieve. I like very much that 3 and 4 tracking progress. But that's hard with aspiration. It was with Vision 2039, we enjoyed seeing those graphs where close do we get to 70% commissioning? How close do we get to buildings and ground improvement? How close to various metrics that you could track and see the goals? And this is a little more aspirational than that Vision 2039 was, but that's not necessarily a criticism. I like aspirational goals that it sets for us, but I think the trick will be tracking the progress.
Now, you should tell us what you how you want to do it.
I think the idea was, this was a discussion. We'll have it. We would, if it's appropriate, bring it to the board for approval tomorrow. But again, it's the emphasis on the word if appropriate. I think it is important to keep the attitude to a high level, because you can get into.
Yeah, no.
And I think that's where I think you and I, at least I know, help you. I kind of, there's something else, some things didn't, but it's a high level piece that the team has to full owning. So, but anything spare. This is an open discussion to,
So, okay, it's a huge document. I mean, I've worked online. It's, what is it, 345 pages, and I've heard what you said, General Wynn.
I think I'm talking just about tab 8.
Right.
Tab H actually is what we're just the plan.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
17.
So when I think strategic plan, when I think of a strategic plan, in 2039, we have our bicentennial. As we're looking at this, obviously, there's a lot of things that are going to have to get done between now and then. And as you stated, well, we're going to need support from the agencies. We may need more support from the state. I think one thing that I've always liked seeing is a picture of what the Institute would be in 2039. What will it be? And then as we look at the strategic plan and we're selling to the alumni or anyone else, how we want to get to that, what that is, there's something tangible to talk about.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry.
you outrank me. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal just came out with the top 400 colleges. VMI was not in there. be among the top five, we have in there top 5 institutions. Do we want to, I mean, I'm just throwing this out there. Do we want to strive to be one of those top 400 colleges?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rankings out.
Absolutely.
And we typically show up in quite a few, the ones that we constantly talk about, US News Report, who have actually altered the way they calculate the top colleges, Money Magazine, so on and so forth. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what the criteria is.
I don't, I'm throwing it out just for discussion if that.
And I think sometimes these things kind of move around. I think we came up with a top 5 college in Virginia because there's certain, and I don't know what the in your business higher education or whatever it is, that comes up with rankings of colleges in Virginia. But I think that's kind of been something that constantly tracked ourselves against.
A couple of things on the Wall Street Journal. We were ranked last year. They changed their methodology a little bit. If you're alumni or cadets don't get up to a level of 50, you don't get to participate in the rankings. So it could just be that we were ranked, I think, one. And we had some other categories. Colonel Wyatt can speak to that. We were ranked by the Wall Street a year ago. They changed the methodology at 50 threshold for participation in a survey where you can't be a part of the ranking. So that may be, okay, we're not in there right now. On the top 5 in Virginia, so what we just are blessed to be in Virginia, that we have the best colleges in the world. UVA, Virginia Tech, VMI. We are positioned right now in terms of graduation rates, top 5. Rankings, news, rates and graduation rates, particularly for Pell grant recipients, as an example, weight heavily how you're going to be ranked in those publications. So focusing on that one, it's good for success and opportunity, and then it will contribute to rankings later on. We anticipate. Sir, I should have stood up and apologized for not banning.
No, that's fine.
Other questions about graduation rates? That particular method? That is very easy, Mr. Bain, to track. We have it in a dashboard now. It's on Chev Research's website, just about any publication. If you want to go out and graduation rates, it's available. Backbone certainly would be a part of the evaluation metrics. Then.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
like, one thing that I've raised before, and I understand, General, you said, I think you identified it as a bold thing in here, but just by way of example, explore value added opportunity offering graduate programs. And then the bullets are, hire a consultant, and that to me actually feels not high level, like a strategic plan. That feels like something that maybe is something you consider as you're considering, ways to deal with difficult financial situation in higher ed or finding ourselves. I just think because that is, just to be honest, like that's I'd say that's a kind of a controversial topic. That's probably too strong of a word, but the idea that a graduate program and the changes that could have on VMI and what it means to, be a VMI graduate. I don't know that, to me, I don't know that particular item belongs in the strategic plan. That's my 2 cents. And I'd also note, and it's not, insurmountable at all, but like as of today, we can't do it because the statute defines us as an undergraduate college. So this would require a legislative fix. So that's one example of something that I saw where I don't know that that's something that belongs in the strategic plan. I'm not saying it's not something you consider, and I think you've got to be innovative about the changing landscape of higher education, but this feels real specific and more than like that's just my 2 cents.
I think it's from the study, I agree with you. I don't feel it's part of what our vision is. It's not. We're an undergraduate program. We're hard to stay there. Sometimes graduate program They can even be very watered down. Not good. That hurts the whole school. Or really strong and they overtake the undergraduate programs. It does encourage other really quality professors to come, there's no question. But we're focused on this undergraduate, just an outstanding undergraduate degree. And I think in civil, I was civil and engineering programs to be in just undergraduate only and accomplish the ABET accreditation. It's huge. It really is huge. And that's something I'm really proud of. And you know, build relationships with other outstanding graduate programs.
We do it with UK law. We have a UK law that.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of how I feel on that. I would prefer to see it out. Plan at this time. Study it, but
Yeah, so the way it's written, again, is not a go, no go. It's to study it, which I know has occurred over a number of years prior. I would say that some of the debate and discussion about it has been, well, you know, watered down the undergraduate experience. Well, I think that the study through a consultant or whatever would tell us, well, you know, here's the things that are immutable about the undergraduate experience of VMI, and how do we, or how could we go about incorporating a graduate level program for the Institute. First and foremost, I would argue that if it were pursued, if it were decided, not the pursuit of analysis or the assessment about viability of it, but if the actions were then taken to incorporate it, we would have to figure out in what way would it look, right? I think all too often, and I think perhaps in the previous study, it might have been centered on kind of what I describe as brick and mortar here in Lexington. Well, part of the study would have to tell us, you know, what is the business case that can be made for brick and mortar here? It may not be that's what we're talking about. It could be something else. It could be somewhere between online. It could be somewhere between online and hybrid, where the hybrid piece is, for example, operating a graduate school program up in the Northern Virginia area. A whole audience of people that are in military, defense contracting, on and on and on. So I think that part of it is that there have been comments made from not only students here, but alum about the viability. And students obviously say that if you had a graduate program, I'd stay here and pursue it, or I'd pursue it, right? And then certain alumni have expressed the same type of interest. And then the other piece is, again, when we start talking about the levers that are available to VMI with respect to the revenue picture that we have talked about and continue to talk about, where we're trying to figure out, or we will be trying to figure out ways to curb the cost of education, right? You've only got three: raise tuition, go back to the state and ask for additional resources, or private giving through our alumni base. All right. So anytime one begins to falter or slow up, then you're turning to the other two because of the continued cost of education that's going up. If you had additional levers, so one of those levers might be in research, right? Bringing in more undergraduate research. It has the potentially, if you model it correctly in terms of its cost structure, it has the potential to bring in revenue. If there's a graduate program, again, depending on how you bring in the uniqueness of the academic program surrounded around a graduate program, has the potential to bring in additional revenue, depending on how you do it. And again, all of that would have to be explored. And I think the business case would have to be made on whether or not it makes sense. But I believe that it doesn't mean that the mission and the fundamentals of the institute have to change. In my view, I think there's certainly a way we can ensure that we stay rooted to and focused on the mission of the Virginia Military Institute and what they produce in undergraduate leaders.
I was on the academic program subcommittee that studied this issue among others for our academic program. And I can tell you, it's obviously a very complicated topic.
It is.
And I frankly think it's good to leave it in this 10-year strategic plan because we're planning for the next 10 years. We don't know what the answer is going to be with this opportunity over the next 10 years. Doesn't mean we're going to study to make a graduate program. It means we're going to keep it. If you don't have it somewhere to think about, it's lost. And I'd like having it in there. And the way you said it, we're going to maybe hire a consultant. We're going to study this. We got 10 years in our future to think about this. I liked your 4+1 concept. We had a 4-year degree +1 to get a master's degree, and it could be just thinking outside the box, you know, online or on-site George Mason related opportunity. These are things to think about over the next 10 years. And if we don't have it in plan, think about, we won't think about it.
Other educational opportunities, you know, they used to run what's called the Mars. It's for engineers, surveyors in the state, and they come from all over the state and they'd be here for a year. Program taught in there, and my partner who's deceased came to the Mars school. I don't know if it's big money here, but it was always here at VMI. And those kind of other educational opportunities with sort of the unique education we have here might be a possibility. That, and I'm just saying, maybe from a strategic plan perspective, we look at it as, you know, additional educational opportunities and platforms as opposed to just graduate.
It's a lot to study. One of the biggest is we suddenly are measured differently as a non-4-year undergraduate institution, and we've gotten so many great
Right.
awards and ratings for being a 4-year undergraduate institution. 3 best liberal arts undergraduate college. We'd be in a totally different setting if we or for ranking purposes. So, but I like on the burner. Good look.
Like having in the plan also, but for me, I'm wondering why it's in prepare exceptional interest.
Repeat.
Sorry, I was just saying that I like having the, you know, exploration of potential graduate programs or maybe other academic programs like Scott was talking about. But I was wondering why it wasn't in the academic to the leadership.
The pursuing the graduate level, the consultancy review and whether or not it should be pursued. Why did we put it in leadership as opposed to academic? Built because of what we said it would be built around largely.
VMI known as a leadership school, the lab, our differentiated set of criteria. All of it.
Was looking at a leadership, continuing education of some sort in leadership.
I think that initially would be the. I understand, speak for the superintendent, but in the way that I would think of it, if I was going to hire a consultancy, say, here's what how could or should we expand this, particularly pertains to leadership? So if they could come up and that would be a starting point. As a continuing education, maybe it's a master's degree in leadership as an example, but they may come up with a whole host of, you know, maybe it's engineering, maybe it's, I don't know, but as a place to start to orient a consultant firm as to what to explore. Situating it within leadership seemed to make sense.
We talked about, if I remember correctly, talked about, to Lee's point, a master's in leadership and or, you know, again, perhaps something with leadership as a concentration or leadership as a minor, which is something similar to what we're talking about at the undergraduate level, right? To expand the offerings of leadership minor to cadets that are graduating with degrees at VMI present.
Another big picture item, looking back at the April comparison of what we talked about. what's not in here now is operational efficiency. I think that keeping VMI affordable should be in here. And I don't think it's hard to put it in. See a couple places where it could be.
As a separate strategic initiative or embedded in the area of facilities and the other five initiatives.
I think it can fit in a couple of the others.
Okay.
Another big picture thing, I'm not suggesting this is its own separate, certainly, category, but I think this runs through all of it, and I'd love to see something in there. I think it is imperative for VMI that we get professional help on our marketing and our external communication. And I think we should, candidly, I think we should invest big in it. I was talking to one of our graduates, Dave Furness, Marine Corps General. He was telling me about the Marine Corps' long-term, over 100-year relationship with one marketing firm. And if you think about the branding the Marine Corps has, love them or hate them, they got branding, right? And we have something so unique, right, and so special to sell. I think sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot because we don't do a good job of explaining ourselves to the broader world, including our own alumni, including 16-year-olds in Iowa, right? And I think what we need is, I think to do it effectively, you really need a long-term partner who can understand this place. I mean, get to a true partner that gets to know us and then helps us across the Institute, helps with our communications, helps with our everything we're doing, right? All of our messaging, huge impact on admissions and recruiting, right? Huge impact with the agencies. I mean, I think and I would just encourage us to really think about making a meaningful move in a long-term way with somebody who will get to know us, understand us, because we're so unique. You just can't bring a consultant and be like, how should we say this? But we have to do that. And so much of this stuff will be improved if we more effectively communicate with the VMI community and beyond it.
It would also help with crisis management. Not that we want any more crises, but I mean, if you have that in apparatus in place.
Of course.
On
Of course, they're ready to go and they know you. Yeah. So I don't know where that goes. I'm not, but I feel like we need to make a real commitment to that going forward.
But I think it goes more also this initiative of fostering esprit de corps, and that plays a bit into it. If esprit de corps is defined as finding common loyalty and fellowship across time and space, from alumni to current cadets, then none of these objectives actually talk about building teams of or building leaders of cohesive, high-performing teams. If ultimately we'll define this experience as honoring things that make us individuals and bring unique diversity, whether cognitive diversity, physical diversity, to problem sets, ultimately our goal is building leaders of cohesive, high-performing teams, whether it's in the military or in the civilian sector. And I would love to see our objectives more reflect that of our story over time and saying how we are building those teams and not hyper-focusing on things that make cadets individuals.
Add to that, Charles Benson, I think you have that within your both esprit de corps relative to number 3, deepening your connection. Alumni donors and parents talks to a little bit of that, as well as when you look at the recruiting initiative on the next one, in your number 2 of and relative to outreach there. I'd say the overall strategic plan framework is absolutely solid as I see it. Provides, again, very clear mission, vision, values, develops a plan based on 5 all supportable initiatives, and each of those have your objective below those. So as I sit down here at this end of the room and listen what the board is saying here, I mean, I think there's some minor tweaks to get after some of the areas that you're talking about, and whether that is to focus on the core, the VMI's model, which has been an undergraduate institute based on a liberal arts program and has been nationally ranked through history on that. And then the other big one is we talked to some minor nuances of how we get after the marketing, esprit de corps side of that, of which VMI historically, minus about the last 5 to 10 years, historically has been a national lead. General Wins, I think your framework is absolutely solid.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually just hearing what Megan said. One thing that I really love in here is the values, right? To me, the values are laid out, and this is just my opinion, but I love the values we laid out, right? The guidance. And back to the esprit de corps. If you read that esprit de corps under the values, that's a wonderful statement. I don't know who wrote it, but we won't call anybody out, but that's a really good statement. And maybe you could take that with an eye towards what Megan said and think a little bit about the esprit de corps.
Because I agree. It is more reflective, I think, of what we're all trying to get.
I'd echo what Jim said. I think the bones of this are very good. I think to points others have raised, the tone and messaging of what this is are almost more important than what's in here. I think 95% or more of our institute community at large has no disagreement with any of the points that are raised, but it's how we say it that is going to be the most important piece. And that is perhaps as substantive as the substance. And you know, I'll just draw, while I am supportive and agree with, you know, the plan, I'll draw two things that I think are going to distract, if not hijack some of our messaging. And the one is I'll pile on the graduate piece. I read that and understanding this is a 10-year horizon. The implied message is we're going to have a graduate program in 10 years. And everyone's going to think, I thought, that's going to be a brick and mortar deal here. And that runs completely counter to our stated objective of being a premier small college. I will strike liberal arts because I'm an engineer, and we are more than liberal. We're
We're an undergraduate institution.
an undergraduate institution, and I think we say small college elsewhere. I think we stick with that, but my own humble opinion. But I think the key point is that graduate program, and gentlemen, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I see potential value there, a la the Mars School, something along those lines that isn't actually a graduate program, but is a public service where people can further their education under the auspices of the institute. I do think that should be looked at. I think it should be investigated. I don't think it should be in the plan because I think it would do more harm than good. And it doesn't mean because it's not in the plan, it can't be a separate initiative that we're looking at. Second piece is actually probably a little less substantive, but I'll say it anyway, just because of the time and space in which we live. And that is the goal about safety, diversity, and participants. And I only say that because those words, for good or ill, are highly charged and people will read into them what they will. And I'm not saying don't include it, and I'm not saying shy away from it. In fact, I think we have to address it head on, but I think that how we write it is important. Because unfortunately, if people see those words, they become a headline and they read into it their own views. But I think that's probably one of the John's point, we've fallen short over the last. What does it mean at the Institute? And I've always taken the e pluribus unum idea. You heard the first captain talk about it in the video. Doesn't matter who you were. Now you're wearing cadet gray, and it's all about your brother ass and something that's larger than you. And if we can convey that message, then I think we've nailed it. But I think we got to be very careful to deliver that message because it's too easy for it to get sidetracked into somebody else's agenda. So, you know, gentlemen, you and I have talked about, you know, actions on the objective once we got on them, and I think that's going to be important. But I think in terms of the broader perspective, that's where I would come down. So I hope that's helpful.
The thoughts and comments, and maybe Cedric and I can grab some time to sort of take this and, you know, see how to move this one forward. It may well be that, again, what we need to do is they can take another turn at this, maybe use the executive committee as a sounding board before we bring it back to the board again, but maybe you and I can talk through that.
Yeah, I do want to say this though. I mean, I think this is good. I mean, this whole thing is healthy, right? For us to be sitting here at this table talking about this is important. And to everybody, the amount of work that's gone into this has really been significant. And I agree, it's good. We got, you know, this fine tuning is what the board should do. And so this is all good, but I just wanted to say that.
Travis feel the same way.
If that booklets don't make good, the enemy of great. I mean, we, at some point.
Yeah, you could doodle it to death,
Yeah,
but these are important. I think these are important.
Yes, yeah.
These are important points.
And we haven't had this very long.
No. Yeah, that's right. Well, again, I think unless anybody else has any final comments on this, I think we've got what we need. I think Cedric you and I will compare notes and go from there. I think it was, as everyone said, a very good discussion.
Little tiny, probably not important, but on page 18, was 99% of VMI employed or graduated with months of graduation. I mean, other than the academies, can any other college in the nation say that?
Right.
So knowing a lot of parents who have kids living in their basement right now, knowing a lot of parents who paid a bunch of money to get architects out of Virginia Tech and find a job in this country. Let's let the world know
Yes.
that is huge, y'all. Huge.
And I think this goes
Huge.
back to our messaging, right? We have such an incredible story to tell. And we're just, I don't know, I guess I'll just say that all of us, we're just not that good at telling it. I don't know why, but we need some professional help.
I would just make that. Like,
Because that's the proof in the pudding, right?
I'm not committing that to anything. There's a lot of professional help to go around.
I think you're spot on. And we're not alone. In the corporate world, this has happened many times. You know, you take Harley Davidson or you take HCA or Philip Morris and the way, and I know this, the way that those companies repositioned and got themselves out of it wasn't their own team. They brought in the experts and examined their culture, what their mission was, what they were trying to achieve, what their strategic plan was, and they helped them message. They also gave them discipline in terms of how to, you know, rules for engagement in terms of communication. We needed it over on the alumni side, and it's nothing against the alumni side, but VMI's been moving along, and all of a sudden we got, you know, hit with a lead pipe a couple of years ago, and we weren't set up to deal with that.
one more little suggestion on the page with the plan. I love all the little quotes y'all put in these powerful quotes that y'all put. But like, I mean, whether you go to General Powell or Patton, put some action quotes in the plan. Because the younger generation tend to do big things and not dive down into little things. And you can really grab some of the younger inattentive, their screen time with some of the quotes that you have or don't have in the sections.
Anything else? Okay, with that, again, I think we'll better get out, I'll compare notes, but about next steps, and my guess is we just need another turn at this, and we will, before we bring the executive committee as a sounding board before we do. And unless there's anything else, we're a few minutes behind, so maybe the next meetings are supposed to be at 3:30. Let's go to 3:45. So we'll have to run between that and the next meeting, but we'll worry about that later, one thing at a time.